All right, welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Ugranik is sparing with you guys. We have an amazing show for you guys tonight. Mitch McConnell kind of wants Trump impeached. Wait, what? Okay, that story's coming up in a little bit. Trump inciting more violence, that's not surprising. And more violence apparently planned, also not surprising. We will get to that. And obviously give you guys a heads up on where that violence might happen, because this is the insane world that we live in. Okay, but having said that, there's a lot of wonderful exclusives on this show. We have an exclusive on a new piece of art that Jim Carrey is revealing today on the Young Turks. That's fun for everybody. And we have a fun exclusive for you guys starting right now. So normally we don't do a lot of guests off the top of the show, but sometimes the Just Democrats, it's a little bit different. And so, and we've had some nice historic moments on the show with the Just Democrats. So joining us now is the executive director of said Just Democrats, Alexandra Rojas. Alex, welcome back to the Young Turks.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Welcome, Alex.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and we're gonna do something fun today. I hear you have a special surprise guest for us with a fun announcement. What is it?
We do. Drum roll, please. We have made our first endorsement as Justice Democrats for this cycle, and we could not be more excited, more humbled, more honored, and how serendipitous it is that it is the state senator, Nina Turner, the progressive giant, the person that I know when I was a founding member and a founding staffer at Justice Democrats was one of the few people that took us seriously, that talked to our candidates, and so we just could not be more proud. So she's our special guest for today.
In fact, here comes the Nina Turner joining us right now. All right, how's this for fun? The gang's back together. So everybody, the first thing you need to do is jdems.us/Nina Turner. I'm not saying anything except for the URL, which I just said, and will be in the description box below. jdems.us/Nina Turner. That's giving to Nina's campaign, which is absolutely critical, as you'll see here. So, Senator Turner, before we turn to you, Alex, you guys have specific criteria and things that you look for in Justice Democrats. So let me ask you a funny question since Nina's on with us. What was it about Senator Turner that got you guys to endorse her?
Well, I mean, she talks about this in her announcement video, and it's just been in every action that I know that I've at least seen from the way that she's worked with Justice Democrats, which is her entire life has been fighting and centering working and poor people in a time where our country desperately needs urgent leadership, whether it was her time as a Cleveland City Councilwoman, her time in the state Senate, her time as national co-chair for Bernie Sanders' 2020 campaign, and so many other things that she has done throughout her career. It has demonstrated through and through that she is committed to not just this office of running for Congress, but to the movement of people and our collective solidarity together to actually get what we need to done in Congress in a progressive agenda. So I believe that Nina puts movement first. She puts others before herself. And that type of selfless leadership, especially right now where we see in Congress, where if we didn't have a Cori Bush, we didn't have a Jamal Bowman, we didn't have an AOC or Rashida or Ayanna, what that would look like. And so imagine if we had a Congress full of Nina Turners, if we had a Congress full of Jamal Bowmans and Cori Bushes, we would see a lot more action on the things that need to get done. And we know that once Nina Turner enters, she will.
So, Senator Nina Turner, now, in order to take the Just Democrats endorsement, you have to be corporate PAC free. very progressive, and in a fighting attitude. Are you comfortable with all those things, Senator?
Let me think about that. Extraordinarily comfortable with all of those things, and so honored by Alex and the rest of the team and the Justice Democrats and what they stand for. You know, I was talking to my staff earlier today, and I said, you know what? I've been a Justice Democrat before that term became cool. Mm-hmm. You know, just the personification of what that means and what this organization means, and just even looking back at the wonderful video that they created, and to see people like Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez and others sitting on that couch, and I'm on the screen trying to pump them up and talk to them about what power means and why it is so important to have the people's power in the hands of people who will not capitulate when it comes to standing up for the poor, the working poor, and the barely middle class. So to be in fellowship yet again with the Justice Democrats, but on the other side, I'm the candidate now. I feel like I've come full circle, and it means so much to me to have their endorsement.
Yeah. Here comes justice. So have I mentioned jdems.us/Nina Turner? I think I might have mentioned that. All right, so let me go back to Alex for a second. So Alex, how much was Just Democrats involved in the Cori Bush campaign to expel the Republicans from Congress? Because mainly you're known for electoral politics, but sometimes you get involved in legislative matters as well. So Cori Bush is a Just Democrat. Everybody knows that, but how can a group like Just Democrats also support actions, whether it's this one or later ones on the minimum wage and others?
That's great. And right now, if you want to learn more about Cori Bush's resolution and sign up to also stand by her in holding these folks accountable, you can go to gopcoup.com to check out the number of folks from the progressive world that are signed on. But this, it's taken a lot to even get here, right? Before in 2018, it was AOC and Rashida and Ilhan and Ayanna. And then this year we were able to elect Marie Newman, Jamal Bowman, and Cori Bush. And so the dynamics have radically shifted, at least internally at Justice Democrats, and obviously externally. For the first time, we hired a political director, because now that we have gotten really good on the front end of knowing what it takes to sort of fire all cylinders on a campaign that we've been a part of, we also now need to invest in governance and actually making sure that all of the work that we are doing on the front end for campaigns is being translated into Congress. And I think there's a lot that Justice Democrats, alongside the sort of breadth of progressive folks that have been doing a lot of work on the Hill, there's so many opportunities. So our political director has been working closely with all squad members' offices to make sure that we're in communication. And specifically for Cori Bush, we've been obviously with her since day one, and we are so proud to see her on day one, literally, of her first term in Congress, actually demonstrating what it means to hold the GOP accountable, especially when our country is faced with attacks of fascists and neo-Nazis have literally entered the Capitol floor. So I think she and others, it's not just her, it's Ilhan drafting the articles of impeachment, it's Jamal writing a bill to investigate the Capitol Police, and then like you alluded to, it's Mitch McConnell even coming out now saying that he might support articles of impeachment. And we know that pressure is because Justice Democrats, because progressives in Congress are actually making noise and are shifting the Overton window, even on something that should be so clear. And so we've been doing a lot of communication support, political support, whatever we can provide. But it really is Congresswoman Bush that's leading the effort.
I have a question, to kind of buttress your point, Alex, but directed toward Senator Turner, because, it's very clear that the message coming from progressive lawmakers, specifically Justice Democrats, is a popular one. But we still have a situation in which some corporate Democrats remain defiant in their own political ideology. They continue to push back against progressive policy proposals. And so what do you envision your strategy to be once you're in Congress and you're able to really make the case for the policies that we desperately need in this country, not just for progressives, but for working people overall across the ideological spectrum? How do you strategize to get these Democrats on board when they've been so defiant so far?
No, thank you for that, Anna. The progressives, and particularly Justice Democrats, but progressives, people who are not just saying the word, but they live the word. Mainline Democrats lost so many seats in 2020, it gives the progressives an opportunity to leverage. And that's exactly what we need to do, to be united in that leverage for good. Anna, you really point out something that's very important. People might not necessarily call themselves progressive, the term itself. But when you begin to drill down and peel back the layers, and you talk about healthcare, you talk about the 90 million plus people who are either uninsured or underinsured. You talk about people who don't have food. You talk about people who don't have a roof over their head when they lay down tonight. When you talk about those issues, changing the material conditions of people, people can relate to that. And that is the call of a justice Democrat, a justice-driven mission. And on the backdrop, as we go into next week, and this point is very important because we're gonna have a whole lot of people quoting the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Can I get a hello somebody on that? But they're not gonna live out the vision of the radical Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was despised in his time by white America. He was barely getting loved by Black America, but his vision is that of justice. Justice economically, politically, socially, racially, environmentally. He was against war. He talked about being seduced by materialism. You name it. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his contemporaries very much ahead of their time. And the Justice Democrats are very much in that spirit. They're in the spirit of Mayor Carl B. Stokes from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, or Congressman Louis Stokes, his brother, from my hometown. It means to push when you have the people's power and to not equivocate on what is just, what is right, and what is good. And then they are going to have to come around, because not only are the Justice Democrats and progressives right there, but the American people are right there. And they are, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, here. We're gonna leverage, to answer your, that was a long way for me to say, we need to make some demands like Frederick Douglass said, and leverage and make sure that there's consequences for not answering the demands of the people.
So Senator Turner, along the lines of what Anna was saying, I wanna go down a list real quick of the things that are happening right now in Congress and what you would do if you were there today. So first, would you support Cori Bush's resolution to expel the Republicans that voted against certification?
I definitely support that and welcome her leadership. As Alex laid out, she is in there doing the daggone thing, and she was in that first class as well. So I'm just beaming with pride. She calls me big sister. I call her little. She calls me big sis. I call her little sis. But just beaming with pride because she is going. She is there right now, doing the exact work that she told the people of her district, and by extension, the people of this nation, that she would do. So I would be right there in support of her.
Yeah, and by the way, the audience should know Cori Bush has already endorsed Senator Nina Turner, and a lot more on the way coming there. But let's continue along those lines. This one's a little harder. Although for you, not very. $2,000 checks, the Democrats promised it, but of course, as soon as the Democrats get the Senate, Manchin says, whoa, I don't know about those $2,000 checks. I don't know if they're necessary. So I suspect that you would be in favor of the $2,000 checks. That's why I say it's not very tough for you in that regard. But what do you do with a problem like Manchin?
Manchin must be held to account by the Democratic caucus itself. He needs to get on board and stop the foolishness and this smokescreen that he and others are putting up about they don't know if it's gonna go to the people who need it. It will go to the people who need it. Millions of people in this country need that. And not just this $2,000. They haven't had relief since March, but we need to give them $2,000 monthly until we get through this pandemic and shore up small businesses and other businesses that employ the people of this thing. How can you in good consciousness? I don't know how some of those folks go to sleep at night, knowing that you have the power in your hands to ameliorate so much suffering in this country. Joe Manchin should be held to account by the Democratic caucus of the United States Senate. And if he don't get on board, then baby, they all need to banty about and get him out of there, period. There ain't no time to play games on this one.
Absolutely.
Well, he's also playing games on impeachment, saying although he thinks Trump should be impeached, he thinks it's a bad idea to bring it to the Senate, where he says the Republicans will vote it down, and that perhaps we should do it later.
It's reckless and dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Alex,
reckless.
What's your reaction to that? And then I'll turn to Senator Turner.
I think it's reckless and dangerous. I think that Senator Turner is absolutely right that the Democratic caucus should hold him to account, because we're going to pay for it in 2022 or 2024 or future on down the line if we don't actually deliver for the American people. And we should not be having Democrats within our own caucus be stopping immediate relief when there are millions of people that Senator Turner just referred to. Not only that, there's some people that it's not like their rent or their payments have been relieved. They've just been pushed back. And that is going to be the ripple effects on our economy, the ripple effects on our society, in addition to what's happening right in this moment outside of the pandemic, when the National Guard is being pulled away or could be pulled away from vaccine distribution. It's a very serious matter, and I hope that Senator Joe Manchin understands that it is dangerous. It is reckless as a strategy for the Democratic Party, and it is dangerous for Americans that need help right now, including in West Virginia.
That's exactly right. Yeah, Alex. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But yeah, his state that he represents, the level of poverty there.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. So
I wanted to add to that real quick. Sorry, Cenk, but I mean, that's part of what frustrates me personally, and this is of course my opinion, but of the Democratic Party overall, that Joe Manchin feels emboldened enough to come out and say that he's against $2,000 checks, as if his own constituents aren't in favor of those checks, which does create a perfect opportunity for the Democratic Party to make its case and hold Senator Manchin accountable, right? Use press conferences, media appearances, whatever it is, to call him out by name and say, hey, the good people of West Virginia also need some economic relief during this time of crisis. And he's the one who's standing in the way of us getting that accomplished. And so I guess my question to you is, Senator Turner, would you be willing to call these Democrats out by name when they serve as massive obstacles in getting important policy passed?
Part of our job in that kind of service is to educate the people and to let them know who's really on their side, to call the question. So absolutely, I've been on record calling the question for several years now, and I definitely will not hesitate, especially if something of this magnitude. This is not child's play. This is life and death for so many people right now in this moment, not just in our country, but in the entire world. And in the wealthiest country on the face of the earth, we have a senator or any other senator that is holding up survival checks to people. It is immoral, it's unconscionable, and yeah, we got to start calling out names. So yes.
Love it.
Yeah. So Senator Turner, one last question then, and it goes along those lines. So look, if and hopefully when you get into Congress, they will immediately tell you, look, you've got to look out for your colleagues, and we're all in this together. And so there's a lot of blue dog Democrats in this caucus, and they're worried about winning in purple districts. And that will often be in conflict with the interest of your voters, honestly, who would want the $2,000 checks, higher minimum wage, tougher police reform, et cetera. So when leadership asks you to make sure you support your Democratic colleagues, and that's a tough question, how do you answer that question?
I will support my Democratic colleagues as long as they supporting the people. Because my first obligation is to the mother down the street who can't afford her groceries. My first obligation is to the family where the mother and or the father may have lost their job. My first obligation are to those children who, because of the pandemic, do not have the requisite technology that they need and have lost so much time in their education because they may live in a district that does not have all the resources needed to educate them. My first obligation and my only special interest are the people who elected me to do their bidding. So my Democratic colleagues gonna get all my support, all my love, baby, as long as they standing up for the least of these, our sisters and brothers in this country. They got my support.
And people wonder why we support Nina Turner. All right, jdems.us/Nina Turner. It's going to be in the description box below if you're watching this later on YouTube or Facebook. So easy to click on it. Then you bring that change. You bring Nina Turner into Congress and let her do what she does, okay? And you make that happen. And you empower her, she empowers you. That's how this thing works, okay? And Justice Democrats helps facilitate all of that. So don't forget to show some love to justdemocrats.com as well. And then the fun begins. So let's see how it turns out, obviously. But we all know that Nina Turner is a hell of a fighter for progressives. And it's great to have you both on, Alex Rojas and Senator Nina Turner running for Congress in Ohio. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break and we'll come back and tell you that breaking news about how McConnell might be supporting impeachment of Donald Trump. A lot more news, so stay right here.
Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is going to be awesome. We're going to help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show.
No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award. Best web host. We passed 1 billion views. Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against Fox. I told you we were coming.
I mean, you talk about it when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America. Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock. And we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
back to back that I like.
Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
All right, back on a Young Turks, Jake and Anna with you on a wild day in America. So Casper, I hear you've got crazy news. Let's do it.
I do. I don't know if this is real life. This is not something I would expect, but Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, a man who has stood by Donald Trump's side throughout the last 4 years, has allegedly said that he is supportive of House Democrats' efforts to impeach Trump over the riots that happened with insurrectionists breaching the Capitol last week. So here's what we've learned through reporting over at the New York Times. McConnell, the Republican leader, has told associates that he believes President Trump committed impeachable offenses and that he is pleased that Democrats are moving to impeach him, believing that it will make it easier to purge him from the party, according to people familiar with his thinking. McConnell, a Republican of Kentucky, has indicated that he wants to see the specific article of impeachment that the House is set to approve on Wednesday, which is expected to draw support from as many as a dozen Republicans, potentially including, and by the way, this was actually just announced, so it is including Republican Representative Liz Cheney of Wyoming, whose father is a war criminal, but nonetheless, she is the party's number 3 in the House. So, while some might give her some credit for signing on to this article of impeachment, let's not forget who Liz Cheney really is. Not interested in rehabbing her reputation. But it is important for Republicans to also sign on to impeaching Donald Trump, because if there isn't a clear sign sent regarding, consequences for insurrection, or more importantly, inciting this type of violence in the Capitol, then it would just further embolden these Trump supporters in the future.
All right, so let me break it down a little further. So is Mitch McConnell going to vote to actually convict him? Well, that we're not as clear about. So I don't want people getting excited saying Mitch McConnell's definitely throwing out Donald Trump. But is he open to it? Definitely, because the devil's in the details. And the devil is McConnell. But anyway, so that's a whole nother story. But in this case, he's doing the right thing, of course, always for the wrong reasons. I'll get to that in a second. So how do I know he's definitely open to it? It's not just that he's allowing this to go in the New York Times, and if he didn't agree with it, he would definitely put out a forceful statement saying it's outrageous, it's fake news, it's not real, and he has not put out any of those statements. But it's also because when Biden's team, or maybe Biden himself actually, according to the New York Times, called McConnell and said, hey, how would your timeline for impeachment work? McConnell did not say there ain't no timeline for conviction in the Senate, it's not gonna happen. He easily could have said that, and he would have immediately kiboshed it. And Joe Biden, if McConnell says something, it's done. Biden would have dropped it, right? And so instead, McConnell said, let me check in with the House parliamentarian to get back to you on the rules of that. Oh, that means he's definitely open to it. He's like, let's figure out how we can do this thing. So why is McConnell open to it? So if they start impeachment now, look, it's slightly debatable whether you can impeach a president after he has left office. Most indications are that you can, and many people have been impeached after they've left office. But what is not debatable is if you start impeachment before he leaves office, can you convict him later in the Senate? Because the House impeaches and the Senate convicts. Yes, definitely. That has been done many times. So now that gets to why McConnell might be doing this. Because if you are convicted in the Senate after you've been impeached in the House, you're not just thrown out of office now, because you say, what's the point of doing it if Trump's already left office? You're never allowed to run for office again.
Sorry.
Oh, and now we have it.
So that was exactly what was implied in this story about Mitch McConnell, where he says that this might be the best way to purge the Republican Party of Donald Trump. And I do think that, first of all, that is an important point to bring up. I do think that's a good reason. If I were a Republican lawmaker and I were thinking strategically about the future, I would try to find ways to distance the party from Donald Trump as much as humanly possible. He's been incredibly destructive to the Republican Party, even though though the majority of Republican supporters and voters seem to think that Donald Trump is absolutely fantastic. I'm worried about what happens after Biden's first term, especially if people are still experiencing economic turmoil and complete and utter frustration as a result of our government just completely abandoning them when it comes to their own economic worries. But I mean, this would, if it goes through, if Trump is impeached for the second time and then the trial happens in the Senate, while Biden is, inaugurated, he's already in power. It could mean if the Senate approves it and convicts him that it's over for Trump. They don't have to worry about him running again in the future. Then they can focus their energy on Don Jr. and his his ambitions in politics.
Yeah. So look, we can't live our lives worried about how Donald Trump's fans are going to get angry and what kind of violence they're going to turn to. So if they ban Trump from politics forever, yes, Trump's fans will be irate. They'll probably cause some violence. But I don't care. We don't negotiate with terrorists. So I think having someone permanently banned from politics is a hell of a thing. And so I would not be in favor of that unless it is the most extreme circumstances. And here we have obviously the most extreme circumstances. And guys, I'll break it down for you guys on whether the Senate is going to convict or not, okay? So a lot of Republicans would love to get him out of their hair. On the other hand, they don't want to upset their base that supports Donald Trump. So right now, if the vote was held today in the Senate, the Republicans would not vote to convict him overall. A couple might, Romney might, Sass might, Murkowski might, but overall they will not get to 2/3 to convict. There will not be enough Republicans. Why? Because polls coming out saying of Republican voters, only 15% want him thrown out of office, 83% want him to stay, 55% believe that Trump had absolutely no role in riots. 7 out of 10 believe he had little or no role, and a majority of Republican voters believe that Joe Biden caused the riots. These are all facts. PBS Marist poll, YouGov poll, they all confirm. So right now, if they held the vote, there's no way the Senate Republicans are gonna vote to convict Donald Trump. But, and this is a giant but, between now and the inauguration, there are several times when there might be more violence. We're gonna talk about it later in the show. January 17th, January 20th, people, right-wing supporters of Donald Trump are planning violence. And Trump is going around saying, hey, this could be very dangerous if people are against me. He's still egging it on, talking about the anger, etc. If he causes a second time for people in power, Republican congressmen and senators, to be in physical danger and they worry about their own well-being, that's the only thing they care about. At that point, that's the only thing that'll trump their political ambition, because they were apparently furious. Trump would not take their calls when they were bunkered in Capitol Hill, when they were being sieged. Apparently, Lindsey Graham, furious and yelling, like, why won't he come save us, right? Because of course he's not going to save you, you idiot, right? So they're scared of Trump. But if he threatens their life again, I think they go to convict him and just get him out of politics forever. That's my sense of how it's gonna go down. And by the way, a Republican put out a message today, a senator, Rob Portman, basically verifying this exact thing I was planning to say, where he said, Trump must now put out a clarion call, be very, very, very clear that no violence is to be tolerated ever. If he doesn't do that and we get violence afterwards, then it's his fault. And so that's, as suspected, that exactly is the standard the Republican senators will use to see if they're going to convict or not.
And you do have Republican lawmakers, like Representative Jim Jordan, Representative McGovern, who are now releasing more and more statements about their experience during that Capitol Hill riot with the insurrectionists. And their language is pretty harsh, and they're referring to the evil in their eyes, which is pretty fascinating because, again, for 4 years straight, they have minimized the role of right-wing swing gang members in this country. They've minimized the role of people like Kyle Rittenhouse, who showed up to a protest happening in a city that he doesn't even live in. And then he, of course, proceeded to shoot 3 people with 2 people dying as a result. I mean, these are instances that happened prior to the riots in the Capitol that the Republican Party was either hush-hush about, refused to condemn publicly, or in some cases even went out of their way to justify and cover up for it. So it's just interesting to see how Republican lawmakers are only willing to change their tune on Donald Trump and what he has promoted if it specifically impacts them and their own safety. They thought this was all cute, fun and games until they realized that they had empowered and enabled a monster in this country that not only incited violence in the lead up to these riots. Let's be clear. I mean, he has essentially given like a wink and a nod to right-wing extremists in this country since the beginning of his first term, and his only term, luckily.
100%. All right, let's do the next story.
All right, well, let's talk about the planned riots because that is a legitimate concern. The FBI is warning of armed pro-Trump protesters and protesters is a very generous way of labeling them, but they are threatening to storm 50 state capitals and do so while they're armed. This is according to a bulletin that was released by the FBI. And there are 2 days in particular that the FBI wants, the American people to be careful about, vigilant about, and that's January 17th and also, of course, Inauguration Day on January 20th. The FBI has also received information in recent days on a group calling for storming state, local, and federal government courthouses and administrative buildings in the event President Donald Trump is removed from office prior to Inauguration Day. And let me read you just an excerpt from the bulletin released by the FBI where they write that the FBI received information about an unidentified armed group intending to travel to Washington, D.C. on the 16th of January. They have warned that if Congress attempts to remove POTUS via the 25th Amendment, a huge uprising will occur. And by the way, I should note that Donald Trump spoke to reporters today and specifically mentioned the efforts by House Democrats to impeach him. And the way he talked about it was clearly a threat. Basically, these Democrats better not go forward with these attempts to impeach me because people are very angry about that. There's a lot of anger about that, essentially saying, don't try to hold me accountable or else my supporters will come after you. There could be violence. And then of course, he loves to talk out of both sides of his mouth and said that he doesn't want violence. But as we've known, he has consistently, pushed his supporters to engage in violence, especially if it has to do with helping Trump politically, including, of course, overturning the results of the election in his favor.
Yeah, Anna, he put the plausible deniability in there by saying he's against violence. And so all of his supporters will always turn back to that. And like they do, they always have excuses for him. He said, there's very fine people on both sides when the Nazis and Confederate supporting people attacked in Charlottesville. And they say, no, he didn't mean the neo-Nazis. He just meant the people who love the Confederacy and slavery. Okay, if you think that's an excuse. And so in this case, they'll say, no, he said he was against violence. But at the same exact time, in the same exact speech, he very clearly said that this is dangerous if they come after me, and there'll be a lot of anger. In other words, you better not do it, otherwise I'll send my minions to attack you again. And remember, now we have detailed reporting from January 6th, where he was apparently fairly elated about the violence and refused repeated calls to try to put an end to it.
For hours, literally for hours, he was paralyzed by watching what was unfolding on television. And he, of course, look, Donald Trump sees it as people fighting on his behalf. Of course, he enjoys that and is willing to risk the lives of members of his own party just to enjoy what happened in the Capitol. He needs to be removed from office right away. But I'm not done yet. That was the FBI bulletin. But Capitol Police have also briefed members of Congress about, the potential for more violence, leading up to Inauguration Day. Now, I want to remind you all that Capitol Police is now under new leadership following, how poorly they handled and prepared for the insurrectionists on January 6th. But the new leadership did warn members of Congress that there could be some pretty serious violence, leading up to the inauguration. On a private call Monday night, for instance, new leaders of the Capitol Police told House Democrats that they were closely monitoring 3 separate plans that could pose serious threats to members of Congress. The first is a demonstration billed as the largest armed protest ever to take place on American soil. Another is a protest in honor of Ashley Babbitt, the woman killed while trying to climb into the speaker's lobby through a broken window. Also, another demonstration would involve insurrectionists forming a perimeter around the Capitol, and this is terrifying, the White House and the Supreme Court, and then blocking Democrats from entering the Capitol, perhaps even killing them so that Republicans can take control of the government. Look, let's just be clear about something, okay? For anyone who thinks it's the right strategy to minimize what happened last week. For people who think, there's no way that there could ever be a successful coup by these individuals. They don't have military backing, except they had members of the military among them as they were engaging in these riots in the Capitol. But you don't need a military in order to try to do a coup. But what matters even more is that these are individuals who are engaging in this violent behavior with the intention of overthrowing our government. That is what their intention is. And they have been persuaded, they have been incited by members of our Congress, Republican members of our Congress, and the commander-in-chief, Donald Trump. That is a serious situation. And if there aren't actual consequences for what took place, then all it does is further embolden both Republican voters and Republican lawmakers to become more and more brazen in their efforts to maintain power, even if it means dismantling our democratic process.
So I want to read you one more incredibly scary quote, Anna. So you mentioned how they were already, the National Guard and the Capitol Police were readying rules of engagement of warfare. That was the language that was used, but it went a little further than just the rioters and Trump's MAGA legion. I want to give you a quote here from Huffington Post. One topic of discussion was the need to put every member of Congress through a metal detector before the inauguration. A member on the call told HuffPost that there was an, quote, eyes wide open realization that Capitol Police needed to take precautions against, quote, all these members who were in league with the insurrectionists who love to carry their guns. The lawmaker added, you can't just let them bypass security and walk right up to Biden and Harris at inauguration. The Capitol Police are going to have Congress people go through metal detectors because they're not positive that one of the Republicans in Congress wouldn't assassinate Joe Biden and or Kamala Harris. I mean, that's the state of insanity right now in the United States of America.
I can't say I blame them for wanting to take those types of precautions. I mean, remember, even after the insurrectionists breached the Capitol, after all of that went down, you still had Republican members of Congress, you still had Senator Josh Hawley push forward with their gross strategy of enabling Donald Trump and questioning the certification of the Electoral College votes, even though they know that there is absolutely no evidence of widespread voter fraud. They still did it. Now, am I saying that Josh Hawley specifically is a threat to the lives of Democratic lawmakers? I mean, he creates a threat by emboldening and enabling the lies and deception surrounding this election. But we're talking about lawmakers in Congress, Republican lawmakers who are clearly unhinged. Like, these are not, normal people who value democracy, who value the lives and the safety of their colleagues, whether it's Republican colleagues or Democratic colleagues, they don't care. The only thing they've cared about so far is doing whatever it takes to pander to Donald Trump's base. And so I don't know, if I were a Democrat, I would want to be incredibly careful. And I don't blame them for wanting to ensure that everyone goes through metal detectors and that Republican lawmakers aren't packing on a day when Joe Biden is going to be inaugurated, because he is the rightful winner of the general election.
Yeah, so last two things on that. Look, guys, on the day of the riots where their lives were in danger and they were all in one location, the Democrat and Republican Congress people, they had Kellyanne Conway, Ivanka Trump, and several others close to Donald Trump call Trump to get them help, to get the National Guard to clear the building, etc. And Trump would not take the call. He was busy watching TV. So in other words, that's him saying, I don't care, guy, if you guys live or die. I don't care. I kind of like it. And so now the memo's out. No, this is real, and your lives are in danger. And so, and do you blame Capitol Police for not trusting the actual Republican Congress people themselves? The new QAnon Congresswoman, or one of the new QAnon Congresswomen, Lauren Boebert, both said that she would bring a Glock to the Capitol. And while the riots were happening, she was talking about where Nancy Pelosi was moving within the building. So yeah, of course you shouldn't trust her. And basically the police are now saying, no, you're not allowed to bring your Glock to inauguration because there's some chance you're nuts and part of the insurrection.
Yeah, she was live tweeting where Nancy Pelosi was as these insurrectionists were in the building, as they had breached the Capitol. So again, just going back to the point I was making, I don't blame anyone who wants to take extra precautions to ensure that they're safe. This is unfortunately the climate that we're living in. And again, it's been incited and emboldened by Donald Trump and his Republican congressional lackeys. So we got to take another break. So let's do that. But when we come back, I do want to focus on a little more detail regarding what Donald Trump was doing as these insurrectionists were rioting in the Capitol. So lots to get to. Stick around, don't miss it. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show. Now,
we'll see. Poor
Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? Now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, easy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone?
Okay, sorry, I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
Emilio D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby. You know, the two people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm. That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it, we will settle it.
She's cute. I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good foster.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now. Okay?
She just can't. She can't, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip into Republicans. See, don't miss the live show.
That's great.
Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT, TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
You guys, the Young Turks, which is my favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
all the people who support us on the internet. That's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you, guys.
Across the map are going to be so tight and so close that it is likely going to be very difficult to call this on election night.
The twin forces behind the Biden candidacy, the billionaires and the Bolsheviks.
Arizona, 19 million. For the vice president, 9 million, a little over 9 million for President Trump.
We are desperate for Donald Trump to not be president anymore because he's fascist and is a threat to our democracy. And we said that from day one. Yes, we want Biden to beat Trump. Is that clear enough?
It is increasingly difficult for the American public to get any sort of truth.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
Here at TYT, we strive to instill confidence in our voters by educating them with factual, reliable, and easy to understand political information. And that's why we've partnered with Politiscope. Politiscope is the easiest way to understand the policies that your elected officials vote for and against. They also have the same goal of changing the perception of politics and reshaping the way political information is sought out and consumed. Politiscope strips away all the unnecessary complexity of politics and empowers voters with raw, unbiased information about elected officials and the policies they support. You can download the Politiscope app on the App Store or on the Google Play Store.
All right, back on the Young Turks, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Casper, go.
All right. What I said was totally appropriate. And if you look at what other people have said, politicians at a high level, about the riots during the summer, the horrible riots in Portland and Seattle and various other places, that was a real problem, what they said.
Well, that is Donald Trump's first public statement, in response to some of the details that we're now learning about the insurrectionists that rioted in the Capitol building. He is deciding to deflect from his own responsibility in inciting the violence that took place. And instead, he's focusing his energy on condemning and persecuting Black Lives Matter protesters over the summer. But let me just remind you all that in regard to the civil unrest we experienced over the summer, there were no reports of police actually helping anyone engage in criminality other than right-wing extremists. You didn't have the high volume of deaths that you experienced in the Capitol in one day. 5 people died during the Capitol Hill riots. Also, pipe bombs were found. These rioters decided to plant pipe bombs near the RNC and the DNC. And then, of course, let's not forget that the whole point of the Black Lives Matter protest was to change policing in this country so it isn't riddled with brutality toward very specific communities throughout America. When it came to the insurrectionists, they were insurrectionists. Like, they wanted to throw out our democratic process just to ensure that someone like Donald Trump remains in power. So to deflect from what actually happened last week, to focus on Black Lives Matter, to even try to draw these equivalencies is absolutely pathetic. But House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy argues that no. Trump actually does take a little bit of responsibility. According to The Hill, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy told GOP lawmakers on a conference call that Trump told him privately that he takes some responsibility for inciting the riots. Trump has not done so publicly, and to be quite honest with you, I don't believe what Kevin McCarthy is saying here.
Yeah.
Trump also. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just jump in on that real quick. So there's been mixed reporting on that. So now most of the reporters are saying that McCarthy actually told other Republicans that he thinks Trump had a role in inciting the violence, not that Trump admitted it to him. And in fact, Trump has of course never said that publicly, disavowed it, and he said his words are totally appropriate, as you guys know. And then on top of that, Trump is apparently miffed that he did that video saying that there would be a orderly transition to a new administration the day after the riot. He's mad that they convinced him to do that. He thinks that made him look weak. by saying that there would be a peaceful transition.
No, I mean, it's the fact that Mike Pence is refusing to invoke the 25th Amendment. I mean, even in this late date. And it's also incredibly frustrating that you have people in Trump's cabinet stepping down from the administration when in reality, they might appear like they're taking a bold stance here, but they're not. They're doing the exact opposite. They would have been far more effective if they remained in the administration and had the courage to invoke the 25th Amendment and get this insane person out of the White House, especially considering how unstable everything is with him in a position of power. But we don't know what he's gonna do. Clearly, he doesn't think what happened in the Capitol was a big deal. In fact, it seems like he's actually pretty supportive of it and refuses to take any personal responsibility for the damage that was done on that day, not just to property, but more importantly to our democracy. You know, it's insane. He needs to be out immediately. I know that there's a little over a week left, but that doesn't matter. I wish these Trump cabinet members just had the courage to do the right thing. But I mean, they've stuck by his side, so I guess it's naive to even think they do that.
Well, I think the Pence example is an amazing one. So I want you guys to know the details because they're really quite horrific. So apparently Pence decided to stay in the Capitol. Secret Service was trying to usher him out of the building. And I don't know if it was because he was worried about leaving the building and running into those folks, or if he was making it a point of principle to stay with the rest of the Congress people in the Capitol. But he was in there, and there's no question that some of the people in the riot were coming to specifically murder Mike Pence. There's the video of dozens of people chanting as they're breaking the door down. They're chanting, "Hang Mike Pence, hang Mike Pence." There's guys with zip ties and nooses. So they're coming to kill Donald Trump's own vice president. And at the time, people are calling into Donald Trump, Kellyanne Conway, Ivanka Trump. They're calling Jared Kushner to call Donald Trump to get people to back out so that nobody gets hurt, including his own vice president. And he would not do it. And now this is one more thing that's stunning about this. He never called Mike Pence was in the building. It took 6 hours to clear the building, and Mike Pence was in there through all the violence. He never once called Mike Pence to see if he was okay. He rage tweeted about him in the middle of the riot, saying that it was his fault and he wasn't brave enough to have the real electors be seated, not the fake electors of Biden. He did it at 2:24 when the building had already been breached for about 20 minutes. And apparently, since all this went down, he's never called Mike Pence to see if he was okay. No,
of course he hasn't. Of course he hasn't. Why are you surprised? Why are you surprised? In his speech, he encouraged his supporters to hold Pence accountable for agreeing to certify the Electoral College votes. But I also want to remind you all of what he said during this so-called Stop the Steal rally, which happened right before these insurrectionists stormed the Capitol building. He breached it and then proceeded to wreak havoc there. Let's take a look at what he said.
And we fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not gonna have a country anymore. We're going to try and give our Republicans, the weak ones, because the strong ones don't need any of our help. We're going to try and give them the kind of pride, boldness that they need to take back our country. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue. I wanna thank you all.
And at the same event, of course, you had Republican Representative Paul Gosar echoing similar messaging, encouraging people to do what they did, and everyone needs to be held accountable for that. Again, because if you don't do that, it just further emboldens these Republican lawmakers. I mean, they have, of course, engaged in so many different stunts, and at this point, where they have willy-nilly put other people's lives in danger, if there aren't consequences for it, who knows how far they're gonna go in the future. Also, Trump followed all of this with more threats in regard to what the House is trying to do in impeaching Donald Trump for the second time, which, by the way, he'd be the first president to be impeached twice. Trump, who spoke to reporters at the White House before leaving Washington for a trip to Texas on Tuesday, to tour sections of the border wall. He said that impeachment would be a continuation of the greatest witch hunt in the history of politics, and accused Democrats of endangering the country in moving forward with it. By the way, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell is said to be supportive of the impeachment efforts. But here is a direct statement. He says that this impeachment is causing tremendous anger. For Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to continue on this path, I think it's causing tremendous danger to our country, and it's causing tremendous anger. And then, of course, he followed it with, I want no violence for plausible deniability. But you know what he's doing there. That's the way he messages to his supporters to engage in the violent behavior that we experienced last week.
Yeah, look, last two things here. Number one, it's one thing if you engage in that kind of rhetoric about fight like hell and go down Pennsylvania Avenue beforehand, and then you saw what happened and you were remorseful. And you're like, oh my God, I didn't mean that. No, don't break into the building. No, don't kill people. That's, what do you guys know? That's crazy, right? It's another thing for you to talk like that, and then violence breaks out and 5 people die, including a police officer. And you're still talking about, well, opposing me could be dangerous and it would make a lot of people angry. He has no remorse at all. In fact, in the video he was forced to do in the middle of that day, he said that they were very special people, the rioters, and that he loved them. And in a tweet, so they're look, guys, think about it this way. They're asking Trump to send in the National Guard to protect the lives of Democratic and Republican congresspeople on his own vice president. To this day, no one knows who gave the order because Trump apparently did not. He did not want the National Guard to protect their lives. Amazing. Then they asked him to do that video, and he was very reluctant to do the video where he was going to tell them, now remember, stay peaceful. Why is he reluctant? Everyone acknowledges he was reluctant. Why is he reluctant to say something as simple as stay peaceful? But that leads to the last part. They wanted him to put out a tweet. And the thing that he fought the most on was the very last 2 words in the tweet, which were literally stay peaceful. He didn't want to tweet it, and he had to be convinced by his entire staff to write that in. It's super clear. He liked the violence. He liked that those people were fighting like hell for him, and that they were threatening the lives of others because he thought that gives me leverage, that gives me more power. Because to him, there is no shame. Democracy is irrelevant, America's irrelevant, the lives of other people are irrelevant. The only thing that matters is how much power do I have? That's the kind of psychopath that's the president right now.
And I have to leave you guys with this one statement from a Trump advisor who was asked why Trump was unwilling to do anything when he had people close to him, people in his administration, even Kellyanne Conway urging him to do something as this violence had broken out. And his advisor told the Washington Post, quote, he was hard to reach, and you know why? Because it was live TV. If it was TiVo or if it's TiVo, he just hits pause and takes the calls. If it's live TV, he watches it. And he was just watching it all unfold. Just imagine the president of the United States standing there or sitting there, watching the insurrectionists breach the Capitol, watching them engage in acts of violence, seeing the images of these right-wing extremists holding flexi cuffs, and you can't get him away from the television to do the right thing, to lead. I mean, he's not much of a leader, but to at least in this case call for an end to the violence. You couldn't get him to do it because he was enamored with what he was seeing on television. It's just absolutely horrendous, disgusting behavior, and that's who Donald Trump is.
Yeah, you remember that picture of the drawn guns holding the door of the house? Who sees that and thinks, oh, there's no danger here? No, he saw it. He was watching live TV. He saw there was enormous danger to the lives of those other legislators, and he purposely didn't make the call to get them to safety. That's who Donald Trump is.
All right, that does it for our first hour. Cenk will be leaving. Thanks, Cenk. And Benjamin Dixon will be joining us for hour 2. Don't miss it. We'll be right back.
You know what the progressive movement needs? It needs a little energy, a little pizzazz, maybe a little caffeine. Oh, coffee. But what if it was too strong coffee? Yes, new twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. Look, this helps progressive causes. It's also organic and fair trade, so you've got peace of mind that it was done right, and it happens to taste great. So check it out right now at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT.
That 300 million is a pretty good number, Well, that's the size of the US population. You know what our next target is? The size of the entire world.
We just crossed 5 billion views on YouTube.
I mean, imagine 10 years ago thinking one day. We looked at you like, are you nuts?
Young Turks has just passed another milestone, 15 billion views.
Damn.
All right, lots of comments. You guys are the best.
I'm gonna read a few comments from our members.
Mr. Methuselah says on YouTube, super chat, thanks for all the important work you do for TYT for the movement.
Do you know who had the first super chat when I got back from vacation? You won't be surprised to find out. Rob Shively. What do you know? Rob says, rejoice, for Dragon Daddy has returned.
This question sent to us by Izzy Sanchez Jr. Is it me, or is Meghan McCain talking as fast as Ben Shapiro? Is that the way the right tries to look smart and intellectual? Well, yes.
Michael Nathan writes it on Twitter. Did Anna choose Cenk's outfit today? I'm sure it wasn't Cenk himself. Man Bun Cenk and Skinny Jeans says, so now Anna has pointed out, okay, that's his handle.
T. Joyce, 1971, saying Donald Trump is good at pulling out of things, NAFTA, the Iran deal, NATO. It's just too bad Fred Trump didn't.
All right, let me do a little quick plug here. It's not even a plug, I'm bragging, okay? I'm bragging, watch me. We have a channel on YouTube, a whole channel devoted just to the Young Turks. It's badass, right? Wow, man. I can see the voice.
You guys are rock stars.
Unbelievable, Senator Sanders. Welcome to Rebel Headquarters.
Man, you guys are amazing. We gave you what you wanted.
Okay. Speaking of shirts.
I have a surprise.
You reached a lot of people. You are the Young Turks. And we have spread that progressive message wide and far. Let's keep it going.
Do you know what we do online these days? Everything. You know that. You're watching the show online. You do your banking, credit cards, passwords, all online. So do you need to be safe? Of course! It's not an option. PureVPN helps protect you online, and they actually do it for up to 10 devices, which is great. And they've got deals right now. That's why I like this sponsor. I want you to go check it out. TYT.com/PureVPN. Make sure you protect yourself online. It's really important. TYT.com/PureVPN. Cool news, shoptyt.com now has books. There's a whole bunch of books there. You're gonna be shocked to find out that they're largely progressive. Of course! Ryan Grimm's book, We've Got People, is there. It's a fantastic story from Jesse Jackson to Bernie Sanders to AOC that explains the progressive movement probably better than any book I've ever read. Speaking of awesome books, my dad's got a book out called The Original Young Turk, where he goes from the poorest olive farmer you ever met in your life to living the American dream.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Benjamin Dixon with you. How you doing, Ben?
I'm doing well, Anna. How are you?
I'm doing well, all things considered, which is an NPR show, by the way. So every time I say it, I think of NPR. Exactly. And that was not a plug; it just happened naturally. But yeah, I mean, it's been a difficult 2021 already. So not much of a positive change since we rang in the new year. But I love hosting with you, so that's definitely a silver lining. So why don't we start off with dunking on Joe Manchin, who is completely delusional about what Democrats should do to hold Donald Trump accountable for inciting violence in this country. Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is Democratic Senator Joe Manchin is pouring cold water on Democrats' efforts to impeach Donald Trump. Now, we've talked about this in detail, how this would all go down, especially considering that Donald Trump only has a little over a week left in his term. But first, let's hear the argument made by Manchin and then see if he's making a good point. Take a look.
Is there any scenario where you see that the US Senate would try and convict President Trump?
I don't see any of that because, if there would be 48 Democrats until we seat Warnock and Senator Ossoff. So until that happens, you need 67 votes. I think my arithmetic, that means we have 19 Republicans. I don't see that, and I think the House should know that also. We've been trying to send that message over. They know the votes aren't there. You would think that they would do that. I think this is so ill-advised for Joe Biden to be coming in, trying to heal the country, trying to be the president of all the people when we're going to be so divided and fighting again. If they're trying to do it now, it's not going to happen. He'll be out of office no matter what happens because Mitch is not going to take it up. Mitch is still the majority leader.
So remember, the Senate would not be engaging in a trial after the House votes in favor of the article of impeachment until after Joe Biden has already been inaugurated. In fact, there are some calls by Representative Clyburn, for instance, to wait until Biden's first 100 days are up, and then the new Senate would have the trial and consider convicting Donald Trump based on the article of impeachment. And of course, the impeachment is in response to Donald Trump inciting the insurrectionists and encouraging them to, do what they did last week, where they did breach the Capitol. 5 people died as a result. There were pipe bombs found. I mean, it was a complete and utter disaster. Now, the whole point is to ensure that Donald Trump isn't able to run for president again. And remember, the new Senate will have Democrats take control with a slim majority. So the real question here is, what would Joe Manchin do if this trial is held during Biden's administration? Would he vote along with the Democrats? And to be sure, they would need to have more than a simple majority in the Senate to convict Donald Trump. Democrats hold a 10-seat majority in the House, and Republican leadership as of Tuesday had advised members to vote their conscience, making it likely that an impeachment charge will pass with at least several Republicans voting with Democrats. So that's happening in the House. In the Senate, a story just broke today regarding how Senator Mitch McConnell is in favor of the impeachment efforts by Democrats because he wants to ensure that the party can purge Donald Trump, and not have to worry about him in the future. But Ben, I wanted to get your thoughts on all of this. It's really frustrating to hear Democrats, shy away from real consequences for someone like Donald Trump, especially after what happened.
Yeah, and that's if we could even consider Joe Manchin to be a real Democrat, but even other Democrats besides Joe Manchin may be a little squeamish here. But I love the way that this is shaping up to be whether or not Mitch McConnell and the Republican Party wants to really get rid of Donald Trump. If that is the case, then I see that this is going to basically be their only opportunity. So if impeachment stands any chance, it's whether or not the Republican Party wants to actually purge Trump from their party. But again, finally, it won't purge Trumpism, sadly.
Right, I mean, exactly. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think it's important to mention that getting rid of Donald Trump and preventing him from having the ability to run again in the future, sure, I guess that's important. I don't know if I ever really bought that he was gonna run again in 2024, but I mean, there were certainly some indications that he was planning for it, fundraising for it. So let's put that off to the side. Getting rid of Donald Trump, though, doesn't get rid of the base that overwhelmingly supports him. Like 75 million Americans voted for him. They looked at the last 4 years in America, the last 4 tumultuous, unstable years in America, and they thought, no, Trump nailed it and I loved it and I'm gonna go ahead and vote for him anyway. Those people exist and they're not gonna go away. So I don't know how, Republicans aren't really planning on addressing that, really. All they've really done is pander to them. But it's something that I think the Democratic Party needs to think strategically about to address it, not in any punitive way, but what can you do to kind of de-radicalize people who have been like, like fed all sorts of insane conspiracy theories through this right-wing echo chamber. Echo chamber.
I'm hoping, if with any luck, this could be analogous to the Scopes trial, where there was the trial of science versus faith, and it kind of set evangelicals back a couple of generations because of the level of embarrassment that came as a result of that trial. I'm wishful thinking here, Anna, but maybe this moment is like that, because I'm seeing more Republicans shy away, and this is obviously anecdotal, and I have to see the data to see if there's really anything statistically significant. But it seems like people are trying to back away from that outer edge that we saw going to the Capitol last week.
Yeah, I mean, because their lives were in danger. It wasn't just about Democrats being targeted. Any Republican lawmaker who wasn't enough of a lackey for Donald Trump was also targeted based on some new reporting that we're seeing in regard to the preparations and the planning that took place prior to the insurrectionists breaching the Capitol. But I also want to remind everyone of where Manchin stood on impeachment when Trump was impeached the first time. Let's take a quick look at that flashback.
Do you think President Trump should be impeached and convicted?
Well, no, there's no doubt about it. He should be impeached, basically. But if we can't do it, you got to be practical about what we're doing now, Jake.
So there's no question that he should be impeached. Again, those were his statements in response to the first impeachment effort where Donald Trump was found to withhold congressionally appropriated funding toward Ukraine unless the leader of Ukraine announced some sort of sham investigation into Biden in order to help Trump get an upper hand in the election. But yeah, I mean, it's just, I'm tired of we need to be practical here. Even in that statement, can Democrats just understand? No, right now is not the time to be practical. I don't think it was the time to be practical back then when the impeachment proceedings were happening in response to what was going on with Ukraine. In fact, they had a narrow scope in their investigation. They should have broadened the scope to include possible financial crimes as well and violations of the emoluments clause. But it's just frustrating to see. Everyone wants to celebrate that Democrats have this slim majority in the Senate, but Manchin will continue to serve as an obstacle because you're right, Ben. I mean, he's not really a Democrat. He's certainly not even a liberal Democrat. I mean, he agrees with Republicans far too often to be considered a member of the Democratic Party. If anything, he's more independent.
Yeah, and the fact that he so quickly inserted himself as a blockade to that $2,000 just shows you exactly the extent to which he even doesn't care about his own constituents.
That's exactly right. I mean, how do you come out so strongly against something that your own constituents desperately need, and I would venture to say desperately want. And by the way, he did walk back his statements after there was enough backlash, because guess what? Financial relief at a time of crisis is tremendously popular across the board. Doesn't matter what the voters' ideology is, political affiliation is. People are really suffering right now, both Democrats and Republicans. And to have Joe Manchin raise his hand and say oh, no way, $2,000, one-time $2,000 check is just too much, and the fake concerns about that money ending up in the wrong hands, when in reality, so much of that relief money from the CARES Act ended up in the hands of massive corporations and not in the hands of small businesses that desperately needed it. So how about you deal with that? But anyway, we got to take a break, I'm sure. So let's do that. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, Lindsey Graham apparently screaming at Capitol Police while the insurrectionists were in the building. We'll give you more details on that and more when we come back.
Well, the Young Turks, the Friday show is gonna be awesome. We're gonna help us over here. Drop it. We became the first ever daily online web television show. No, the Constitution is the very core of America. The fact that we don't spy on American citizens, that we get a warrant, that we go to a judge, that we have a procedure, that we have due process, that is America.
On top of it, they go, why don't they just stay at their own schools? You gotta realize something. These schools suck. They want people to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. You ain't got no straps, you ain't got no boots.
He lit these fires in trash bins all around town out of frustration.
99th most viewed channel today on YouTube.
The Shorties Award.
Best web host.
We passed 1 billion views.
Voice Award winner, News and Information Channel, The Young Turks. Oh, another Webby.
The Young Turks.
Can I curse? Yeah! For those of you watching on the live stream, yes, we have adopted a pet iguana that showed up at our door.
Haunted version in the dark with our silhouettes.
Now let's get to the best line of the debate. And it was definitely the one against Fox. I told you we were coming.
I mean, you talk about it when it becomes a problem. Our lack of gun control is a problem.
Nonsense BS story is hurting that cause, and they need to wake up and recognize that they are being had by these people.
Biggest gang in America.
Question is, how do we make sure that we blame the person who is dead? What kind of democracy is that?
We should never forget that the most powerful people in the world exploited the greatest tragedy in American history to go to war in a country that had a lot of oil.
Rolling thunder. That's what this show is.
Never in my life did I think I would like to see a dictator. But if there's going to be one, I want it to be Trump.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
Where's the line? We've crossed every line you can imagine.
We are a socialist country. It's socialism for the rich.
Tick-tock, tick-tock.
You don't have to know the truth, just believe what they tell you.
There is no bounds to their monstrous hypocrisy. Tick-tock. I think we're gonna win the Senate in 2020. And I think we're gonna have the House, and I think we're gonna have the presidency. Tick-tock. And in 2020, we're going to clean your clock, and we're gonna run you out of town, and we're gonna have an actual democracy in this country. November of 2020 could also be potentially the greatest day of our lives. Let us whisper of a dream.
Smacked it back that I like. Say hi to the camera.
I don't like this.
Hey everyone, welcome back to TYT. Anna Kasparian and Benjamin Dixon with you. Make sure you check out the Ben Dixon Show and also follow him on social media. Ben's a good friend of the show, and we want to support other progressive voices as much as possible. So definitely check him out. Ben, do you have a Patreon account?
Yeah, patreon.com/the BPD show. I mean, thank you.
Love it. Love it. All right, well, let's get to Lindsey Graham, because we've learned a little more about what was happening with Lindsey Graham behind the scenes at the Capitol. So Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown went on MSNBC to shed some light on what senators were going through as insurrectionists had breached the Capitol and essentially threatened members of Congress. Now, Lindsey Graham is someone who has enabled Donald Trump. Lindsey Graham is someone who has covered for Donald Trump because, in his own words, he thinks it's important to stay relevant. So what was Lindsey Graham up to? What was going on as these senators were in a secure location? Here's Senator Sherrod Brown to explain.
I heard when the 75 senators were confined in a room with about 75 staff people, Lindsey Graham with his mask off started screaming at one of the officers. I think it was one of the captains, saying, "How come you didn't protect us since you're doing your job?" This is the same Lindsey Graham that for 5 years or for 4 years, he didn't do it at the beginning, defended and argued for and encouraged and aided and abetted this president and all of his followers who were perhaps as extreme.
Senator, while you were still in the emergency of it, you saw Senator Graham yelling or berating an officer. I mean, what was he getting at? What can you tell us about that? Do you think he was wrong to do that?
Yeah, I've not said this publicly yet, but when I hear Graham and these others say these things, and he was screaming at an officer, he had his mask off, screaming at his officer from 5 feet away. I was maybe 10 feet from the other side. And the officer the police didn't do enough to protect us.
Well, the police didn't do enough to protect anyone, but there was a lot more done for members of Congress versus everyone else who was in that awful situation. I mean, we saw images and video of some Capitol Police taking selfies with these insurrectionists, and I bring that up because it is important to investigate, the Capitol Police and make sure that we don't have people who sympathize with right-wing extremists working in that position that's meant to keep people safe. But a spokeswoman for Graham confirmed Brown's account, by the way, but said that the senator shouted at the Senate Sergeant at Arms, the top law enforcement officer in the Senate. Graham made his feelings known directly to him, the spokeswoman said. So Ben, what do you make of this? I mean, it's the chickens coming home to roost. I don't want anyone to get hurt, but I'm curious what you think about Graham's reaction to this.
He aided and abetted this like the entire time, right? They created this monster, and it's coming back to destroy them. And the fact is, it is their own constituents. And so for Graham to yell at anyone, he should be yelling not only at his constituents but also at the president of the United States who fomented this violence. And two, also one thing that's very important with regard to the Capitol Police, I think sometimes we forget that there are a lot of police officers in any capacity at any level, federal or local, they are not apolitical. They are political actors who simply have on a uniform, and putting on that uniform does not take away their political ideology. And if you look at voting records, you'll see a lot of them do lean Republican or even Donald Trump. So, I mean, they are always there in that capacity, whether or not they have on a uniform or not.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. And right now, the military is grappling with something that I'm sure they've known, but now they have to at least give the appearance of doing something about it. And it's the infiltration of white nationalists and white supremacists who are sympathetic to what happened in the Capitol last week with these insurrectionists breaching the building and threatening lawmakers' lives, in an effort to overturn the results of a democratic process. But I'm not shocked that Senator Graham was shook by what took place, because remember when the Congress reconvened, that was when he gave this impassioned speech about the election is over, Joe Biden has won. I mean, he was talking about it in such a way that you would think, if that was the first speech you've seen from Lindsey Graham, you would think that he was on the right side the entire time, right? Yeah. And people were giving him credit for that speech. He doesn't deserve credit. Remember, Lindsey Graham is the one who pledged $500,000 of his own money for Trump's legal battles, court battles, where they're alleging widespread voter fraud. He's lost every single one of them. His lawyers have failed to provide a shred of evidence in regard to widespread voter fraud. But to your point, Ben, Lindsey Graham had enabled these lies and the deception all throughout. And for him to now be shocked at what he's going through, what other lawmakers are going through, is just ridiculous and pathetic. He should take responsibility for his role in this.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I should also note, Sherrod Brown mentioned that he was screaming at this Capitol Police officer, without a mask on while COVID is still ripping through the country. I'm really sad to share that Representative Pramila Jayapal tested positive for COVID following the riots that took place. She specifically mentioned that when she was in a secure location with other members of Congress, including, of course, Republican Congress people, they refused to wear masks. There was a video that went viral that showed them mocking people who were offering them masks. And so this is how COVID spreads. And these people who have absolutely no empathy for other people's lives, while simultaneously pretending like they're pro-life, just have no right to represent anything in this country. Clearly, if they don't value other people's lives and they don't respect keeping other people safe during this pandemic, how can we trust them to be in a position of power in this country? All right. Well, let's move on to Antifa because surprisingly, some Republican lawmakers are like, we got to stop. We got to stop with the Antifa lies, probably because they realize that we're starting to suffer some consequences. We're getting banned from social media. We don't want to suffer more. So let's get to that. Trump continues to baselessly claim that Antifa had infiltrated and took part in what occurred in the Capitol last week, January 6th, when insurrectionists had breached the Capitol building. Trump privately and falsely blamed Antifa people for storming the Capitol. In a tense 30-minute plus phone call this morning with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Trump trotted out the Antifa line, but shockingly, McCarthy put an end to it. He said, it's not Antifa, it's MAGA. I know, I was there. And of course, the FBI confirmed Friday that there's absolutely no evidence that Antifa activists were involved. A White House official said that the call was tense and aggressive at times, with Trump ranting about election fraud and an exasperated McCarthy cutting in to say, stop it, it's over, the election is over. And that's something that should have taken place way earlier, but at least McCarthy is telling the truth in this context.
Yeah, I love the fact that he said he knows that it was MAGA because he was there, because he is MAGA. I mean, it just works out so good in that particular statement. But I mean, no, I think you said it in the last story, Anna. They are trying to get on the record for history to make it seem as though they were on the right side of history the entire time. They have not been. They have been aiding Donald Trump in this. The fact that it went so far as them being willing to overturn the results of the election should be the milestone and the benchmark by which we determine their interpretation through history. They tried to destroy America. Even Kevin McCarthy, Lindsey Graham, Mitch McConnell, all of them stood by while Donald Trump tried to overturn those results from the election, and they helped him. That's what we need to remember about them throughout history.
One other thing that he mentioned was that it wasn't just MAGA people. It was also the even more extreme component of these MAGA supporters, the QAnon conspiracy theorists. So he called that out by name. That is that it was in fact right-wing extremists and QAnon adherents, and he urged members to stop spreading false information to the contrary. I also want to just note that I never trust Republican lawmakers, especially like Kevin McCarthy, to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Remember, there are all sorts of companies and banks that have now said that they will no longer do business with Republican lawmakers who challenge the Electoral College votes on that day. You have companies and donors, for instance, which, by the way, I'm not giving them credit because these donors are full of it. But some of the Republican donors are saying that they're no longer going to contribute any campaign donations to Republican lawmakers who have engaged in this reckless behavior. So I think a lot of what's happening now with the rhetoric coming from Kevin McCarthy is more about ensuring that there isn't more damage to Republican members of Congress, as opposed to just doing the right thing, ensuring that they stop spreading lies, which then further radicalizes the right wing in this country, which of course then leads to more violence.
Yeah, and it's that vicious feedback cycle, right? That feedback loop that no one from the Republican side seems to be willing to step in and stop, except for the point where now 5 people are dead and they actually made it to the steps of the Capitol. So the real question is how far will it go next time? And if we don't make any concerted efforts to actually hold people accountable in a substantive way, we're gonna find ourselves dealing with an even more organized insurrection.
Yeah, exactly. And some of the proponents of getting rid of these like QAnon Twitter pages and ensuring that these conspiracy theories stop spreading throughout these social media platforms so rapidly is to ensure that they don't have. It's not as easy for them to coordinate and plan more of these riots moving forward. I think that there might be some truth to that, although I would argue that these are people who seem pretty hell-bent and will find a way to communicate and organize these types of awful events. But I do think that, Donald Trump not being able to tweet the dog whistles, to tweet all sorts of messages where he'll have that little line of plausible deniability. But the rest of the tweet is just encouraging people to engage in violence. I mean, we've seen that for 4 years straight. And I've had enough of it. You'll see like on message boards for the right wing, if Trump has said, hey, go out there and condemn the violence, they don't trust that he actually wants to condemn the violence because he'll always have a statement that encourages them to keep engaging in the violence. And then he'll say, I don't want the violence. No, he loves the violence.
Yeah, and you know what? If Donald Trump's time off of Twitter is anything like mine, he should be refreshed, rested. I'm sure his edges are coming back, and he's starting to look good again because Twitter was toxic with him, and it was toxic without him. So this is for his own good.
That's right. Log off. All right, let's go ahead and take a break. When we come back, though, we have some more detail into white supremacists who are in the military. Some of them have been caught, some of them are facing some consequences. But the problem is far bigger than most people realize because the military really doesn't have a way of keeping track of individuals who have all sorts of red flags. Don't miss that story, it's super important. We have that and more for you when we come back.
Cenk Uygur is not here today, which means that I will be able to talk during the show.
We'll see.
Poor Cenk, under the bus.
My God, if Jesus came back, how much would the Republicans hate him? So now you have to give away all of your possessions to the poor. Steve King would be like, oh, Weezy. Everyone should be lucky enough to have a John Iadarola in their life.
You confused everyone?
Okay, sorry, I thought it was pretty clear.
Take a break now.
You can turn me to Dr. Manhattan as long as I get what Dr. Manhattan's packing, okay?
The liberal mom says, Mark Thompson, have you ever thought about doing one of those tapes that soothe people to sleep? Like Mark Thompson reads the phone book. I'd buy it.
If you'll buy it, I'll do it.
D'Amelio writes in, John, you are so thick. I love you. That's what he wrote.
Pork Chop Express writes in and says John Iadarola needs a new jacket.
Whoa.
Those 24-inch pythons are about to burst out of his sleeve.
Gun, baby. You know, the 2 people here said that their moms were both in love with you over Beauty and the Beast.
That's an improvement. I usually get grandmothers.
Charlie Turk.
No, wait a minute, don't you dare.
Chemical castration when we return from the break.
I hope that, who they choose for the White House isn't just a borderline Klansman. That's all we gotta hope.
That's it, we will settle it.
She's cute.
I didn't say that about Laura Ingraham.
Scandal at TYT. Did Anna comment on my tan yet? No, she hasn't.
You're a good boss.
But Anna did say that I come in here today with a fresh mind. That's all I'm about. I'm about a fresh mind.
I can't with you right now.
Okay? She just can't. She can, but nonetheless, we have to for another 3 hours. I'm back, baby. Let's rip in the Republicans. See, don't miss the live show. That's great. Tell people, if you're a member, you get the whole live show whenever you want, because this stuff doesn't go into any of the clips.
You are the media revolution. You are much needed.
TYT, TYT. The place is like 95% TYT on.
You guys, the Young Turks, which is my favorite channel, we're getting that message out.
Cenk and the Young Turks do an extraordinarily good job.
No matter what mainstream media says, you have to listen to the Young Turks.
The people who support us on the internet, that's what gives us strength. That's what allows anyone who was in there who was undecided to think one side seems to be winning. They seem to have a bigger army. There might be a reason for that. So thank you, guys.
Across the map are going to be so tight and so close that it is likely going to be very difficult to call this on election night.
The twin forces behind the Biden candidacy, the billionaires and the Bolsheviks.
Arizona, 19 million. For the vice president, 9 million, a little over 9 million for President Trump.
We are desperate for Donald Trump to not be president anymore because he's fascist and is a threat to our democracy. And we said that from day one. Yes, we want Biden to beat Trump. Is that clear enough?
It is increasingly difficult for the American public to get any sort of truth.
And this is why what Cenk and the Young Turks are doing is so important.
Here at TYT, we strive to instill confidence in our voters by educating them with factual, reliable, and easy to understand political information. And that's why we've partnered with Politiscope. Politiscope is the easiest way to understand the policies that your elected officials vote for and against. They also have the same goal of changing the perception of politics and reshaping the way political information is sought out and consumed. Politiscope strips away all the unnecessary complexity of politics and empowers voters with raw, unbiased information about elected officials and the policies they support. You can download the Politiscope app on the App Store or on the Google Play Store.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. During our breaks for our online audience, we do social breaks where we read their comments. And I actually wanted to apologize to one of our members who wrote a comment that was, I read it incorrectly. Sarcasm doesn't come across with comments online. So it was a comment about Kamala Harris, and I now realize you were just joking around. So I apologize for how I read it because I did misread it. And now I get your joke. And it's fantastic. So I feel bad about that. Anyway, but let's move on to our next story because this is something we've been, focusing on throughout the week because I think it's important. And now we're learning more details regarding white supremacists within the military and how some of them were certainly involved in the riots that took place. So the military is ousting a junior officer after he posted TikTok comments joking about the incineration of Jewish people, joking about the Holocaust as if that's something worth joking around about. But Second Lieutenant Nathan Freehofer was an artillery officer who had amassed 3.8 million followers on TikTok. But now the military finds itself tackling with not only the issue involving Freehofer, but more importantly, this ever-growing problem, which to be sure has been a problem, regarding white supremacists within the military, within its ranks, especially since there were notable veterans present during the insurrectionist riots in the Capitol. So here's what we know so far based on some reporting from Politico. A retired senior Air Force officer allegedly took part in the riot in the United States Capitol, and a Navy veteran who also played a leading role was arrested over the weekend. Meanwhile, a rioter who was killed while trying to break into Speaker Nancy Pelosi's office suite was also an Air Force veteran who espoused far-right and QAnon conspiracies. And this is what should really concern everyone in the country. Because when we talk about coups, the issue of the military comes up. Would the military back a coup for Donald Trump to keep him in power? Well, a 2020 survey actually found that more than 1/3 of all active duty troops and more than half of minority service members reported witnessing firsthand examples of white nationalism or other ideologically driven racism within the military. So we knew that this was a problem prior to the riots taking place in the Capitol. But it's more of a problem than even the military realizes because they don't really monitor this stuff. They don't really keep track of it. They haven't really had a system in place to keep an eye on people who have raised red flags within the military. And that is an issue. And now the chickens are coming home to roost as we realize just how bad white supremacy is within the military. That's not to say that everyone in the military is racist or is a white supremacist, but much like local police departments throughout the country, there has been just this infiltration of white nationalists within the military, and something needs to be done about it. But Ben, I wanted to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, this is part and parcel with what you just described about local policing being infiltrated by white supremacists. I mean, this is America. America is drenched with white supremacy. It's willing to burn this country to the ground. It's willing to abandon the entire democratic experiment because of the grievance of white conservative men who have never had to lose in their lives. And so America is held hostage by that same white supremacy that is present in the military. And it's not a quietly kept secret. I mean, it is well known throughout members and retired members of the military that racism exists. The most terrifying notion is the first part you mentioned, Anna, about how many of these people would actually go along with the coup. We have to keep in mind, that he was their commander in chief. And so in some ways, all they had to do was obey his directions, depending on if there was anybody in hierarchy who would prevent this from happening. And so the real question is how high up does this white supremacist allegiance go? I would argue it goes all the way to the top.
Yeah, and again, it's something that clearly is not being investigated by the military. And I'm not surprised by that. I mean, I remember in 2012, there were endless headlines regarding female soldiers who had been raped or sexually assaulted within the military, and there was no justice. They would go to their higher ups, they would report it, and they would actually suffer consequences as a result of reporting it. And nothing changed. The military was supposed to restructure the way that soldiers can report instances of sexual assault and rape, not just women, but male soldiers as well. But the story just kind of faded away. And so what kind of accountability is taking place within the military when it comes to instances of sexual assault and rape? And clearly for what we're experiencing in the country right now, when it comes to white nationalists and the hatred that they espouse, one representative spoke out against this, Jason Crow, who's a retired Army officer and chair of the House Armed Services Committee. He said that there is a crisis, issue, the rise of extremism and white supremacy in the ranks that has been fueled by President Donald Trump, unfortunately. So that has to be dealt with right away and unequivocally. That's top of the list. But what I appreciated about that statement was that he did clarify that this existed before Donald Trump. Like, I think it would be a mistake to think that everything that we're experiencing right now is only due to Donald Trump, and all we need to do is get rid of him and everything will get better. No, Donald Trump exacerbates our systemic flaws because he loves to exploit them for political gain. But those systemic flaws always existed and nothing's been done about it. Like, I guess one of the silver linings for Trump, and I can't believe I'm even saying this, but I think it's true. He kind of forced people to come to terms with the fact that we have to make pretty significant changes in this country. Like, we need to address all sorts of how our system's broken in the military, in policing, when it comes to immigration. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on.
Yeah, and Anna, the terrifying notion about this is that if we go back to normal on our side of the equation, we know for a fact that Trumpism will not go back to normal. This is the new normal, and so we have to also figure out how we're going to deal with the resurgence and the renaissance of white supremacy.
Definitely, and I do want to also give you a few statements from Mark Pitkavage. He's from the Anti-Defamation League, and he had some pretty terrifying insight. He says that the number of extremists in the military has increased due to a higher percentage of white supremacists attempting to join the military and the development of white supremacist leanings among some currently serving personnel to an even greater degree than in previous surges of extremism. The internet has played a role in the present one, with extremist content found on websites, discussion forums, chat rooms, social media, messaging apps, across gaming and streaming sites and other platforms. And he mentions that a number of right-wing extremist groups, such as the Oath Keepers, expressly recruit members from the military. Pikavage also noted that a litany of incidents involving right-wing extremists in the ranks over the past few years, including troops offering to teach how to make explosives and target left-wing activists, joining pro-Nazi organizations and traveling to Ukraine without orders to train with a right-wing militia. And also a Florida National Guardsman even founded a neo-Nazi group. Again, this is a very real problem that has not been addressed. It wasn't even being reported on until the insurrectionists breached the Capitol and threatened the lives of congressional lawmakers. Had that not happened, would we be discussing white supremacy within the military? Would this be an issue that people would be calling for, solutions to? I doubt it, and it sucks that it has to get to that point where members of Congress feel afraid for people to acknowledge that something needs to be done. All right, well, we have time left, so why not focus on one more lunatic before the main show is over. And for those of you who are members, we are gonna have a fantastic members only post-game show today. Don't miss it. Ben Dixon was kind enough to stick around and do the post-game with me. You can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. Now let's move on to Lauren Boebert. Lauren Boebert is facing some criticism for suggesting that Capitol Police were involved in last week's riots during a GOP conference call in which Republicans discussed their concerns about the attacks. Now, Mediaite reports that according to multiple reports on the contents of that conference call led by House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Boebert, who is a conspiracy theorist, by the way, told her fellow members that the Capitol Police may have been involved in the deadly incident. Now, look, to be sure, there should be an investigation into why the Capitol Police were not prepared, especially with weeks and weeks of threats made regarding Congress certifying the Electoral College votes. It seems like it was intentional. The Pentagon says that they offered members of the National Guard in order to help assist with the possibility of violence breaking out, and the Capitol Police denied that. But to be clear, Boebert is not trying to hold police accountable for being sympathetic to these insurrectionists. She's just trying to place the blame on anyone other than the Republican lawmakers, herself included, who have enabled Donald Trump's lies and encouraged some of the violence that took place. So again, she is a conspiracy theorist. She's coming under fire from her own colleagues. Let's go to Jake Sherman's tweet where he says, bit more from the House GOP call. Boebert suggested Capitol Police officers were in on the riot. Nancy Mace responded by saying that she's angry at the lawmakers that got Congress to this point, and she's disappointed that the party is being led by QAnon conspiracy theorists. And of course, Boebert happens to fall under that category. And throughout the violence that was taking place on January 6th, she was tweeting out, literally live tweeting the whereabouts of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Let's give you two examples. She said, we were locked in the House chambers, and at one point she also tweeted, the speaker has been removed from the chambers. So that was incredibly irresponsible behavior. And again, it's not just about Boebert, it's about every Republican lawmaker who has lied to the American people about the reality of the election, who has enabled Donald Trump, who is engaged in these conspiracy theories. These are not people who are fit to be in positions of power in this country.
Yeah, wow, that last part, they are not, certainly not fit to be in power, and yet we're constantly led by these men, children who have no capacity to handle rational thought, apparently. And I was just taken aback by that B-roll footage of them removing the American flag and putting in the Trump flag. It's just so remarkable that we are dealing with people who believe that they are the height of patriotism, and yet they, well, for a second time in history, have tried to supplant the American flag with another one.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, remember, these are people who love the Confederate flag. The Confederates were traitors to the country, but they love it. I mean, everything that they claim they are, it's the opposite. They're not patriots. They don't love the country. They're willing to do anything and everything to cheat, lie, steal, dismantle our democratic process just to keep their guy in charge, even as their guy has proven to be a massive failure, not just to the country overall, but even to his own supporters. I mean, what has Donald Trump done for the people who decided to breach the Capitol on January 6th? I mean, they're not, by the way, some of them are literally CEOs making, some of them are making six figures. We should be clear about who those people were, because I think far too often people are under the assumption that these are all like random, middle of the country, rural Americans who don't know any better. No, that is not the entirety of Trump's base. And there were people who are very well off engaging in the riots that took place last week.
Right, and that's why whenever I talk about this, I always talk about this in context of both race and class, because let's be sure the people who had the time and the resources to get to Washington D.C. so that they can cosplay and climb the walls and just have like their big weekend adventure, that cost money. And so we oftentimes like to label all Republicans somehow. We think of them as working class when most of them are probably upper middle class and certainly representative of the top 1%.
Yep, exactly. And look, if you want at least one easy solution to ending the organizing and funding that goes into this violence, get rid of money in politics, but specifically dark money, because there was quite a bit of dark money that went into funding what occurred last week. And you read those details and it's infuriating, because we could focus on solutions. We could focus on what's broken in this country and how all of this managed to happen, right, in plain view. I think it's right to bring up issues of race in addition to issues of class, because that does certainly play a role. And make no mistake about it, I mean, the fact that you had Capitol Police, in some cases, being incredibly friendly with these people. You also have the stories about how Capitol Police rejected any additional help. And aside from what happened in the Capitol, as we know through all the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that took place over the summer, I mean, the persecution toward those demonstrators who had a legitimate concern that they wanted solutions for, versus what we saw with these individuals engaging engaging in something that's undemocratic and unconstitutional, wanting to throw out the results of the presidential election because they don't like it, wanting to throw out our system of government because they didn't like the outcome of one presidential election. I mean, the thing that drives me crazy is people trying to draw these false equivalencies between the last summer and what we saw in the Capitol last week.
That Stretch Armstrong level of, I don't even know how you can do that in good faith. And I'm thinking a lot of them just have accepted the fact that they're going to engage in bad faith with us.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I think it's important to recognize when people are interested in having a fact-based discussion and debate versus people who don't care about the truth, don't care about the facts, do not engage in good faith, and you're just really wasting your time, trying to persuade them to see things the correct way. So in the post-game show today, which I'm really looking forward to, there was a weird statement from Hogan Gidley, Trump's national press secretary, regarding his masculinity. What was that about? Why did masculinity come up? And is Donald Trump masculine? We have some receipts. It's gonna be a fun segment, I promise. We're gonna have a very, very good time. And then Ben, I know I plugged your show already, but why don't you plug it one more time before we end the main show?
The Benjamin Dixon Show, and you can join us every morning at 8:30 for the Morning Trap. It is an experience.
I've been seeing some clips from it, and It's a spicy show. I love it. It's a really, really good show. Make sure you guys check that out. And as always, you guys can watch our post game. It's for our members only. They help make the show happen. They keep us sustainable, and you can become a member by going to tyt.com/join. We'll be dunking on Trump, dunking on Hogan Gidley, and just having a good time. You don't want to miss it. So we're looking forward to seeing you there. Everyone else, have a fantastic night, and we'll see you tomorrow.